good afternoon, and welcome to the Bridging and Commercial and Castle Trust Bank virtual roundtable, during which we will be discussing all things Buytolet. Bar a few weeks this summer where people understandably escaped on some well-needed breaks, we have been running these roundtables regularly, either through our Bridging and Commercial or Development Finance Today brands, and have covered a whole host of topics that are important to stakeholders within specialist finance. Buytolet has definitely surged in popularity and importance for our readers and our virtual audience. And I'm really delighted today on this Friday afternoon to be teaming up with Castle Trust Bank to tackle some of the finer nuances about this particular product area. And I'd also like to say thank you and a big welcome to our three specialist brokers who will also be shortly introducing themselves. To those who are watching or listening, thank you very much for tuning in. Grab a coffee or tea or a beer, maybe, given that it is Friday afternoon. And please be reminded that you can pose questions to the panel at any point throughout the session. We'll try to answer as many of them as we can. We may do that as we progress, or we could do it at the end. Just a little bit about our topic today, a bit of context, which I will certainly be leaving the majority of to our experts. But in the past year and a half, and even predating COVID pandemic and the associated economic turmoil there, landlords have had to contend with significant shifts in tenant circumstances, as well as changes to eviction legislation, compliance and taxation. On the other hand, the stamp duty relief measures and that period marked an opportunity for investors to build their portfolios and consider other categories within this broader asset class, such as holiday lets and HMOs, a lot of which has been written about during this period. Given all of these seismic changes, including those to affordability, tenant values, the need for space, and the reported migration away from city centres, we're here today to discuss the advice that brokers and lenders can provide for landlords for the remainder of 2021 and also beyond, in order to make sure that they grow and scale sustainably. We'd also like to sort of pay particular attention to the finance products and offerings that are out there and whether they're meeting the current needs of landlords. Although there seems to be an ever-widening range of buy-to-let products available via specialist providers, and that appetite is definitely strong or getting stronger, it is crucial that brokers and their investment clients are armed with the information related to the distinction between a standard buy-to-let and some of the other subsectors prior to committing to that. And all of that is exactly what we will be hashing out today. So I'm going to hand over first to Rob to tell us a bit about who you are, what you do at the bank, and what you're looking forward to in the session.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon everybody. My name's Robert Oliver. I'm the sales director here at Castle Trust Bank. I've been involved in the mortgage intermediated lending probably since about 2005-06, so been through a few peaks and troughs, should we say, but I fully understand the world you guys are in as brokers and how difficult it is. So one of the most enjoyable parts of my job is speaking to people like the three panelists here and trying to find ways we can offer your clients solutions. So today I hope you find it quite useful. There's a few bits we can talk around the market, some things around innovation, and just show you ways where you can potentially write more business and give you some ideas of some of the pitfalls as well, because it's always useful to see both sides of the coin. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Kim, move on to you for an intro.
Yes, good afternoon everyone. My name's Kim McGinley. I'm the Managing Director of Vibe Finance. We're a specialist mortgage brokerage based on the South Coast. But yeah, so looking forward to the conversation today. Short and sweet from me.
Mike.
Hi, good afternoon everybody. Mike Coates from Commercial Expert. I'm the Managing Director. We are commercial finance brokers specialising in the property market. So quite informed about HMOs and holiday lets and anything that pops up really.
Excellent. And Alasdair.
Thanks, Karen. Alasdair McPherson from Rangewell. One of the areas that we focus on at Rangewell is complex and specialist buy-to-let.
Fabulous, thank you. So we'll launch into the first part of our discussion, which again is just a brief overview of the buy-to-let market, where it is now in Q3 of this year, and a bit of a summary of the changes that landlords have faced as a result of the pandemic. There will be a time, I hope, where we're no longer referencing COVID and all of that, and we can move forward to a sort of a different type of era, but it is still incredibly relevant. So I'd like to start with you, Rob, if that's okay, just to give us from your perspective and the bank's perspective, what's been going on?
Yeah, I think a bit like you, getting sort of slightly sick of mentioning the word COVID. So we tend to do the analysis based on really on sort of Q4 last year into this year. So to give you an idea, we're seeing the buy-to-let market remaining just as strong and growing arms and legs at a good pace. Give you an idea of that, just in one particular section for us, the holiday let inquiries, we get 43% up in Q3 than they were in Q1. Which is great. It shows people are still looking and still wanting to buy. We're seeing from our existing clients that there's a lot of diversification in the market. So we're seeing existing landlords who have perhaps been more standard buy-to-let, so looking to diversify, and they're moving more into the holiday lets, probably still the favourite one for us, but the HMOs and the multi-unit conversions are still proving popular. And then on the other side, we're seeing the feedback from the landlords to say that tenant demand remains incredibly strong. I think the house prices that have gone up immeasurably in the last 12 months, which I don't think were predicted by many people, have probably further priced certain level of people out of the market. So it is still unaffordable to buy a house in particular parts of the UK. So rental remains popular. We had a fantastic scheme that we did a development exit on for a new build for I think there's about 67, 68 units in a place called Four Oaks, which is in the suburbs of Birmingham. Just in one weekend, the landlords decided to try and rent a few. So they had an open weekend and we actually rented 56 units in one weekend. And that just shows the absolute demand from tenants. And I think from that perspective, that drives good demand, and you're seeing lenders quite comfortable in that space because there is the demand there. So, lenders are looking for innovative ways to drive their proposition forward, which in turn helps landlords purchase things. And I think on the flip side as well, there's some data that came out last week talking about rental voids. And I think they reported in August that it was an average rental void of 15 days in some parts of the UK, which has come down by about 15 to 20%. Some parts of the UK have come down from 20 days to 18. Manchester's close to my heart, being a northerner. So I'll obviously divert to that type of statistic looking locally. But also what we're seeing as well is that landlords are moving into different parts of the UK. So again, the smaller towns and university cities are really generating very, very strong leads. And whilst I'm being completely diverse, I was told that Cardiff apparently has the best yield at 9.6%, so higher than Manchester, so I can't comment about that. But I think we're seeing the landlords now still wanting to expand their portfolio, still looking at different areas, but the key to anything is the location and potential demand. And without that, we've got to be very, very careful going into those markets. So I think that the more traditional buy-to-lets are remaining strong, but the diversification we're seeing a lot of, so landlords can perhaps mitigate some of the tax that they were historically able to gain relief on. They can obviously pull that back through different yields.
Thank you. That's very interesting. Alasdair, from your perspective as a broker, what do you agree with there? What are you experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what a lot of Rob says. I think COVID, as with many areas of our life, has accelerated change that was happening anyway. I think what we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years is buy-to-let has become much more professional, and it's become a real business for most people that are involved. The days of the guys that have got, an accidental landlords have got 1 or 2 properties have got. So it's a proper business, and I think COVID has just accelerated that, making people think about things a little bit more. Certainly, as Rob says, search for yield, search for diversification. And I think proper businesses, if they're running it as a business, they're always going to be looking for more yield, and more yield obviously means slightly more complicated situations. And slightly more complicated situations means specialist products from people like Castle Trust. The things that we have seen is, huge interest in buy-to-let. We focus on, we're nationwide, and I think the interesting thing, as Rob said, is that change of location. So people in Manchester may be thinking, you know what, I'm looking for yield, I'm going to do some buy-to-lets in, say, North Wales. Student accommodation is another one that we've seen really coming back. You know, at this time last year, everybody was worried about, you know, whether it's purpose-built student accommodation or HMOs as student lets, is that ever going to come back? You know, we have seen incredible demand from the landlords that we work with in student cities and towns, where stronger demand than ever. Probably even the students moving up market a little bit in terms of what they're looking for, search for space, etc. HMOs have come back strong. Everything has come back strong. I can't think of any area that isn't in the buy-to-let market at least as strong as it was 18 months ago.
Thank you for that, Alasdair. Mike, what's your perspective on the general overview?
Yeah, I think I agree with Rob. I think it's very, very postcode driven now. In the huge cities, I think people are moving away from that. Certainly, if I'm from the northeast, so the yields are much higher in the northeast. Property prices are lower. Deposits are easier to obtain. Stamp duty in itself, obviously, because of the reduced purchase price. But I think investors, professional investors, are really going for it. I think, as Alasdair says, the accidental landlord is slowing down slightly. You really need to know your onions when you're buying property now. Your rental voids are there. You need to understand the complexities and the costs of running a buy-to-let, and the portfolio landlords know what they're doing.
And Kim, just to come over to you to sort of round off this part of the discussion, just what are your impressions right now? What are your clients experiencing?
I think from where we were a year ago to where we are now has just come on leaps and bounds. I mean, it was so speculative this time last year, you know, about the whole student lets, like Alasdair was saying. It's completely remained strong. Like the products that are coming out now, just when you think rates can't get any lower, lenders are coming out with like new low 5-year fixed rates. It's so competitive, such a competitive market. We're seeing like the diversification, like we've spoken about. You know, everyone's got a different property strategy. For some people, they're driven by the higher yields. They're now starting to look up north, like Mike just said. But other people, we're finding a lot of people just want to add value to these properties. So we're seeing a lot of bridging loans at the minute, adding value, taking that equity out as soon as they can and moving on to the next project. So it is very much a market, I think, for serious investors at the moment, like we've said. But it is really interesting. Like if I could go back and tell myself last year what all the speculation was about to where we are now, it's, you know, it just still remains such a strong market. I think for brokers like us, because it is still so complex, criteria, appetite, I think that we're needed more now than ever for advice. So it's not straightforward, some of these applications that are still ongoing, but no, it's an interesting time at the moment. But the market, thank God, remains strong, which is good.
That's great. That's a really nice way to set the scene for this conversation, that it is incredibly positive. Just picking out some of the opportunities, areas of opportunity that Rob, you kind of sort of initiated there, looking at holiday lets, looking at HMOs, looking at multi-unit freehold blocks, looking at the different sub-sectors of this sector. I'd love to hear the panel's view on which one of these perhaps presents the most opportunity. Are there any that stand out today as something that investors as well as brokers should be aware of? And Alasdair, I'd love to start with you on that.
So touching on something that Mike said, everybody has their own strategy now, and I think that's great, right? So if you're a professional, you've got your own sub-market and your own sub-strategy. That can be regions that you're focusing on or types of property product. But Kim mentioned something really interesting as well, which is what I would call getting to buy to let. So you're going to have a holiday let or you're going to have an HMO, but you know, Kim's mentioning we see a lot of demand at the moment for that sort of medium to heavy refurbishment, where you're buying a property, but you're maybe extending it or you're change of use, and that is where I think professionals are sort of, they've got their expertise in a specific sector. They're saying, right, I've got this house here, I know what I do, I'm going to buy it at a reasonable price, but I can afford to pay that price because I'm going to convert it into an HMO, or I'm going to turn it into 2 holiday let flats. And that's where some of the specialist products that are now available, where you can be sort of buying and sort of bridging, but with that sort of certainty of exit to a buy-to-let, I think is really useful. So buy-to-let is great, but that feeder product into the buy-to-let, I think, is something that's really, there's quite a lot of demand for that from what we see over the last 6 months. And that, I guess, ties into everything that we've been talking about in terms of professionalism and having a real strategy for knowing what you're doing.
On that note, Alasdair, is it helpful to you to work with providers that can offer the lead-in product as well as that, and then perhaps even further than that?
Yeah, I mean, that is a perfect example of, you know, Kim, I mean, of course we're going to say this because we're introducers, but the fact that you've got introducers that know their clients and lenders that know their product talking about stuff and coming up with a new product. So why has this sort of refurbishment, bridging to buy-to-let happened? Well, because there was demand for the refurbishment, but also, you know, as good introducers and sensible property investors wanting to know that they've got a certainty of exit into a buy-to-let product once the work's been done. And I think that's just an example of the number of new products that have come out. Kim, I think, touched on that as well, where we're in a competitive market. There's a lot of lenders out there. The lenders that are getting the business and the lenders that are getting traction with introducers like ourselves are the ones that listen and bring out new products for what the demand is. Right? If we think about where we were 18 months ago, some of the products that are now in the market, development exit is another perfect example. We're there, and people were, you know, a few lenders did it, but they didn't really focus on it. They didn't really do it well. Now, lots of lenders have got specific teams of underwriters looking at development exit because there is the demand for it and they know what they're doing. So I think it's really positive that the number and variations of products that are out there now.
Thank you. Mike, what would you like to add to the sort of areas or sub areas of maximum opportunity right now?
I think as an investor, you need to know your strategy. You know, if you're going to be building your portfolio and increasing your equity for an exit as a sale in the future, then okay, maybe your good old standard buy-to-lets are the right thing to do. Maybe you buy that in limited company. I know we're going to talk about that shortly. But some investors, professional investors, are looking for pure income. Great opportunities in the high street. All local authorities are wanting to drive residential into the high street because it's failing. So that, you know, HMO would be absolutely ideal for that. Again, we're going to chat about it soon, but the race for space is there. There's so many, you know, permitted development rights, the relaxation in change of use rules with local authorities. There's a huge opportunity, and the lenders, and all lenders, including Castle Trust, are firing products out into the marketplace. So there's clearly a confidence in there that the buy-to-let market, no matter what it is, will grow.
Yeah. Rob, as a provider of these products, how do you monitor how to keep up with what the changing needs are from landlords? How are you developing and turning these products out? What goes into that modeling of that?
So in simple terms, I've always had the philosophy, actually, speaking to the brokers, any lender can go out and pull various price levers, but it's about, as Kim said, adding the additional value. So, you know, we go out and talk to our partners and saying, what do you think we should be doing? So I'll give you one example. We offer a product which is a bridge with a guaranteed exit. We didn't sit in a dark room and devise that. We spoke to our partners and said, what do you need to happen? And we brought that to market back end of last year. And again, the proposition sort of goes from there. We're also getting feedback from people who perhaps have got low yields to a degree, but actually capital appreciation in the property itself. Therefore, you look at maybe a longer term fixed rate that allows you to stress at a different level with a shorter term early repayment charge. And again, we brought that to market, and we've just spoken to our partners. So I think when we speak to the landlords and you speak to the brokers, and Alasdair's right, when people enter these transactions, that they've got to build a strategy, and Mike summed it up quite nicely, that actually, who is your market? What do you want that market to be? Now, if you take Kim's philosophy of people are buying assets and looking to refurbish them and take them to a different level, if you're going to go after a high-end holiday let market, you've got to think of what's the furnishing, what's the decor going to look like, what the facilities there. So you've got to factor that into the build costs and factor that into the money that's there. And for us, when you have a bridge that you purchase a property with and there's capital appreciation, it makes common sense to actually take the new value and lend against that, because you know the clients, you've already underwritten it once. So for us, it's that constant communication. And let's be honest, and Kim may smirk, we get it wrong sometimes. But what we always do is we learn from those mistakes. And you know, I'm very fortunate that the three people sat around your head at the moment on the panel give us some honest feedback. And that's what we need as lenders. You know, we don't always get everything right, but actually we learn and try and develop and enhance the proposition in line with what brokers want. And Alasdair mentioned the development exit. You know, if you're looking to look at the larger portfolios, you've got to have innovative ways to fund the transactions. You know, whether it's part term, part bridge, part term on an early repayment charge. And the asset I discussed with you in Four Oaks before, when we did the development exit on there, part of it was on a bridge because they knew half a dozen to a dozen of the tenants would want to buy those properties in the 6 to 12 month period. So as a landlord, why won't you release some of your capital? Therefore, as a lender, you've got to produce a bespoke product that allows people to pay off their part of the debt with no early repayment charges. So there's lots of examples where lenders can be innovative, and you know, and we're seeing some really good products, as Alasdair's saying, you know, and the more lenders that come into this space, the better. And you know, the LTV curve's always one thing, the risk curve, some of the innovation around processing that you don't need certain documentations through open banking, etc., makes the journey smoother and slicker. But I think for us, it's just, and I speak on behalf of many lenders, it's just learning and working closely with our partners and not just continually driving rates, because brokers and clients need to see innovation as well.
Kim, do you find that this level of collaboration or transparency is reflected across the majority of the lender market? Is there any sort of areas of communication that you would like to see improved on when they're devising products for this space?
Yeah, and I think Rob's completely hit the nail on the head that, you know, for those lenders that listen to the brokers and work in collaboration with them, those are the lenders that are actually at the forefront of the brokers' minds. Unfortunately, I don't think it's, you know, some lenders aren't quite so open with that. And I think what has been really transparent throughout the whole of the COVID situation is that, you know, a lack of communication with certain lenders has been detrimental to them, for their reputations and things like that. So that's the one big fundamental, I mean, for any brokerage to function and for any lender to function properly, without communication and that breakdown, it kind of all falls apart. So, I mean, you know, luckily lenders like Castle Trust that actually listen to the brokers and, you know, coming out with these products that are really beneficial to our clients is a huge thing, and they're the lenders that are then at the forefront of our minds. So yeah, I think it's a massive deal, you know, to work in collaboration together. At the end of the day, it's not brokers against lenders, and it really isn't, even though some, you know, underwriters and credit teams don't like brokers. But yeah, you know, collaboration is everything at the moment. So yeah.
Thank you, Kim. I'd like to just focus a bit on.
Can I just touch on something that Kim said there? It's something that we were talking earlier about, you know, landlords have become much more professional over the last 5 years. I think exactly the same has happened with brokers and lenders, right? You know, the market has sort of started to stratify with, you know, your one-man band, Buytolet guy, he's got the one property. He doesn't expect the quality of service that your professional landlord needs now, which is why, you know, we are held to very high standards by our clients, and we and the clients hold the lenders to very high standards. And I think you are starting to see, even within the broker market, sort of stratification between brokers. You know, I think probably 10% of the buy-to-let broker market, from a broker point of view, will focus on the specialist and complex situations. It doesn't pay that much more than the standard, but it's a lot more complicated. And you can say exactly the same to the lenders. And I think, you know, Castle Trust, I would say, is one of that leading pack. And, you know, there's others as well, Rob, to keep you on your toes, which is a good thing. But there is a leading pack of lenders that are now out there saying we want to be known for specialist products. tell us what we need to be doing. You know, as Rob says, tell us what is missing. And I think that, you know, the whole market is just pulling ahead. So professional landlords know that they've got professional brokers, professional lenders that are all working together, and genuinely, and I really mean this, we're working in partnership, where I think, you know, your underwriters want to be dealing with professional brokers and professional buy-to-let, and all, you know, it's just a virtuous cycle. And as you can see, that you're making very good risk-adjusted returns, because, you know, Castle Trust and that sort of specialist lender market are not as cheap as your high street, for a reason, because the high street don't do what they do. If they're getting that risk-weighted returns, then the underwriters are going to say, right, tell us the next product we should be getting into, because there is a market and we want to service it. So I think it's a really positive. I think there's a really positive vibe around the market at the moment, and I think, you know, these professional, not to go off topic, but these professional landlords are actually adding a lot of value to their local regions as well, right? So some people think that buy-to-let landlords are parasites and taking properties that the man on the street can't buy. But if you've got specialist landlords that are permitted development, turning unused buildings into student accommodation, or they're turning offices into quality, you know, one-bedroom flats in high streets, that is a positive regeneration for the market. So the whole thing is actually building on itself and becoming much more positive impact in the local area, and professional as well.
I'm quite interested in this concept of the professionalization of the landlord market. And yes, there is a perception out there, I suppose, which perhaps isn't as true as it once was, which is interesting. Mark, do you have anything you'd like to add to that around, I suppose, why is the market evolving in such a way?
I think the professional landlord realizes that it's an income, it's an employment. It's not just something that oh, well, I'm going to buy one and I've got a few quid, I'm going to buy another. They actually can generate a full living and lifestyle out of that. And if they've got a long-term view, and as Kim mentioned before, they've got to have a plan, they've got to have a master plan. Property prices will grow. They might dip a little bit, but eventually, you know, you could say 20, 25 years, 30 years, the portfolio will be a different value. And if professional landlords realize that, then they can gear up and refinance their portfolios and maybe diversify to slightly different things, taking advice from good quality brokers like us lot. I think there's some massive opportunity. And, you know, there's been a lot of things that have happened to make it very difficult for people to buy property. Obviously pandemics, obviously taxation, you know, there's furlough, there's so many things, there's voids, there's safety measures, there's lots of tenants' rights. You have to be a professional now. You can't just wander in, go and buy a buy-to-let property and think you're going to make a fortune. You really do need to know what you're doing, but clearly you've got to take some good advice too.
Yeah, that's quite a good point. I did a quick rundown on the changes that have affected landlords in 2021 alone, and the list is it's pretty intense, especially in relation to tenant management and rights. Could we move on to the holiday lets topic, just in particular, because at certain points during the last 18 months, I'd say that the argument for investing in that market has been clearer than others. And now we are seeing people jetting off. We are seeing a bit more of an open approach to going abroad again. Is this as rosy a sub-asset class as it has been described? Is it a flash in the pan? Is it definitely something that we should and can be encouraging landlords to consider expanding into? Rob, I might come to you with that first.
Yeah, so I think if you look at the input for the transaction, which is the number of inquiries of people still wanting to purchase them, versus the output, i.e. where you go on your holiday, and just focus on that input area, we as I said before, we've seen a big uptake in demand for potential people wanting to buy. So I think what we've noticed over the period is the quality of the holiday let has gone through the roof. So, you know, when we started the sort of tracking these really close inquiries, people were just speculatively transacting in the space. But as Mike rightly pointed out, now what we're seeing is people now will target a specific market. It's a product, because at the end of the day, people expect certain levels of accommodation. And whilst people are still nervous about traveling and You know, we're still waiting for the Wednesday red, green, amber lists to come out. And of course, if people are stuck over there, they can't get back here. And certainly as an employer working for a bank with 200 plus people, it does become a bit of a pain when somebody goes from sort of green to amber to red whilst they're on holiday. So people are still nervous. And you know, I follow a few people on Instagram and Facebook, and there's a lot more photographs of people in the Lake District and in Wales and in Scotland than there are in Ibiza and Spain. So it does give me an indication that people aren't travelling. But the bit that people need to understand investing in the holiday let market is, as Mike said, it's not a lifestyle, it's not a dinner table landlord. This is a proper investment. These are professional people. So you've got to really take professional advice for the asset initially, but then when you create your market, you've got to run it as a P&L. This is opening up as it is a business now. So, you know, with the best will in the world, the first thing people probably did in the summer when they got in their holiday let was turn the air conditioning on. Well, they won't turn it off until after they've left. So by definition, you're going to come in September, put the heating on and turn it off in May. So your electrical and utilities bills are going to be far, far higher. You've got to factor that in. You've got your cleaning costs, you're going to have to change all the bedding, etc. once a week. So these are lots of little things on top of the decor, the facilities, etc., etc. So people need to really understand this is not a standard buy-to-let. They've also got to understand the market they're in and where they are and the location. You know, if you're aiming at young professionals, you've got to make sure you're not in an island where there's nothing else on the island other than cottages, because you're not going to get that type of market. So when you're doing the decor and you're looking at facilities, whether it's hot tubs or spa baths, whatever it is, you've got to understand that market you're in. So we're seeing people now coming to us with a far more robust business plan. And when the brokers present a case to us, and Alistair's alluded to it, our underwriters will pick the phone up and have a conversation and understand what the client's trying to achieve. And that then takes it way past the rate discussion, because it's about the most suitable product and the most suitable way to actually finance that transaction. So I think what I'd say is, our people are looking to go into that market, they need to understand all those things. And then on top of that, you've got the difference in whether you're paying council tax or small business rates, depending on the occupancy levels. And then the one pitfall I'd say for people is just be conscious around restricted use, because we're seeing quite a few transactions that are on these wonderful holiday parks. And yes, we'd all go on a holiday there together and they've got beautiful views, but actually there's a lot of restricted uses there. So I think a good broker will be able to walk through that with you and make you understand that. So I think for me, that's one thing for everyone to consider from that point of view.
Thank you, Rob. Kim, is there anything you'd like to add on there about some trends that you're seeing with perhaps the applications that you're getting in for holiday lets? Are people coming into this with eyes wide open? Are they understanding the business plan aspects to it?
Yeah, I think they are. I think it's easy to get caught up in the hype initially that, you know, for properties that were let on standard single ASTs, oh, you know, I can earn triple that by letting it as a holiday let. So from what Rob's just said, yeah, I mean, understanding the costs involved of running it as a holiday let is a completely different ball game, and also it's so much more management intensive. A bit like when people are diversifying into the HMO market for the first time, it's not as simple as, you know, if you're just used to your single ASTs. I think that also from what Rob said, I mean, from a brokerage perspective, it's understanding the products themselves. So for a lot of these holiday let products, they do with ones that don't have any restrictions to being used as a holiday let, it does still need to fit. The lenders will mostly stress it on the single AST rental income a lot of the time. So again, from a brokerage point of view, it's key for these clients to be speaking to the right people to make sure that all of those calculations that go on in the background fit the lender's criteria and appetite. So I think that it's really good now that we've got more lenders coming into the holiday let space. Some are even looking at, you know, your high, medium and low level incomes for holiday lets and things like that. And the higher LTVs seem to be coming back into play. But yeah, I think it's just fully understanding the costs involved and the management level that it takes. Like we said about the cleaning, you've got people in there for 1 or 2 nights. It needs a clean, a full-on clean. So yeah, I think it's just, I think we're lucky that we're speaking to clients that seem to understand what they're doing when it comes to holiday lets. We're not really speaking to anyone that's going into it completely naive. If I'm honest with you, I do think it's here to stay for a while. I think with what we've been through, even if, you know, the travel industry opens up completely next year, we haven't got this, you know, amber, red, whatever the colours are anymore, system going on. I think people just will stay in the UK for a while because they don't want to go abroad, and, you know, they get put off with the hype of doing the testing and stuff. So I do think the holiday lets are here to stay for a while, but again, it just depends on lockdowns. And, you know, at least with single ASTs, if you've got people in there for long term, you've kind of got a guarantee of the rent. With holiday lets, should we ever go back into another lockdown and it stops happening, it's those rental voids, which is why lenders go into affordability so much.
Mike, just picking up on something Kim mentioned there about the way that holiday lets are underwritten by lenders. Is there enough of a pragmatic view on that in terms of how the underwriting is assessed? Because there's a couple of different ways of approaching it, and one might be more suitable to holiday lets than another. Are lenders adapting quick enough to service this market effectively?
I think lenders have come into the market fairly quickly because of the need for holiday let in the UK. I don't think we're quite there yet, personally. I think there's a lot more work to do. Income is a huge thing. The client's got to have some serious wool on the back. Maybe bank accounts have got to have 6 months worth of payments there. You know, it is a go into that market with your eyes wide open, because there's things like damage that people don't understand. You can't just pop a tenant in there and then pay you for 12 months. It could take 2 years to build up the review scores on your website, or going with the right agent or the wrong agent. I don't think we're there yet, personally. I think there's a lot more to come. Do I think the holiday market is here to stay? 100%. I think people they're either terrified of going abroad now, which I do understand, or they've actually seen our wonderful country and think, you know what, I'm actually going to go on holiday in this country this year. So yeah, investors are definitely wanting to invest in holiday let, and we can see that increasing. But I really do think they need to be very, very careful and take some really good quality advice, because it's not straightforward.
Alasdair, do you agree?
Well, absolutely. We do a lot of holiday let stuff at Rangewell, and actually we get a lot of brokers introducing deals to us because they say, look, I've got this guy, I'm not too sure what lenders are doing what in the holiday let market at the moment. So we see lenders that will do restricted covenants. We do have lenders that will look at an average of seasonality. Again, it all comes back to brokers giving lenders feedback in terms of what they need. I think we've tripled the number of lenders that we are actually transacting holiday lets with over the last year. In terms of, I'm a big proponent of holiday lets, and again, it all comes down to professionalisation, right? So we are not interested in the guy that phones up or the broker that phones up and says, I've got someone just back from Cornwall who thinks he might want to buy a holiday let, and they're going to stay in it for 6 weeks doing something. We're like, thanks very much, go speak to someone else. We deal with professional holiday let experts, and two things are happening. Number one, Mike touched on it. I think even when we get back to normal and you can fly to Florida or you can fly to Spain, people will still do long weekends, weeks in the UK. And I think the high season will probably stay where it is, but the mid-season will expand massively to, in November, despite my accent, live in London, November, let's go to Kent for the long weekend, get a nice converted farmhouse with some friends, have a sort of dinner party away from home. That is just going to be there forever. And what we see is people that are actually got their own business and they've got 4 or 5, and again, it might be round about Canterbury or it might be in the Lake District or wherever it is, and they're sort of professionalising it. They're making a business from it. They've got a mailing list of people that have inquired before. They're putting, Halloween pictures on Instagram. They're actually promoting their holiday lets across the year to their client base, or other people are using managing agents that specialise in holiday lets and are doing exactly the same. So we work with a lot of managing agents. So if people come into us, we can refer them to specific managing agents. We've got a managing agent that specialises in holiday lets for dogs, and you would not believe So I can, you know, they will cross-sell, right? So you've been to Canterbury with your dog one weekend with Mr. Jones, and now let's go somewhere else in the month. So that sort of cross-selling, that sort of, we've got guys that do holiday lets with sea views, not just, Rob, in what you would think as the standard holiday let areas. Actually, people get bored with Cornwall after a while. They say, hey, let's go to Folkestone. Is Folkestone a holiday let area? Yes, it is, because there are people selling it as an easy weekend from London. So these guys, holiday lets are here to stay, even when you can fly to Florida for the week. Cheaper than you can take your dog to Folkestone, people are still going to take their dogs to Folkestone, is my pitch.
Thank you for putting Folkestone on the map, because I'd heard of it before. Okay, so that sounds like a good summary of that part of the market. I do want to move on to HMOs. From an outside perspective, we're sort of inside, but lay people at the same time. For me, I had looked at it from the point of view of the race for space, as Mike called it, and then also some of the just social angles of an HMO, gardens and being around people that aren't your people, and all of these sort of things that have changed from a value perspective over the last however long we've been under these conditions. How has this part of the market developed over the last 18 months? Is it still, again, a good space to be looking at? And I suppose would we put multi-unit freehold blocks in this same category? Can they be discussed together, or not really? Mike, I might start with you on that.
Yeah, I think so. It's an easy way to get out of the hole for people starting out. Potentially in an HMO, it's cheaper for a tenant. I think from a landlord's perspective, it mitigates risk, it mitigates their voids. I still think there's a huge market for HMOs and MUFBs. I think there's some things to be mindful of, in that lenders are still valuing those properties as single dwellings. Some are anyway. I also think that landlords need to be quite careful that fire and safety regulations and costs and bringing up the property to legal specifications might eat into profits. But I think, is there demand? Absolutely. As I mentioned before, it is easier to get out into an HMO rather than buying into a property, or maybe a higher rental payment to start off with anyway.
Do the yields that one's able to get via doing that, do they outweigh perhaps the management thereof and some of the aspects of bringing it up to specification like you've described?
I think it's a calculation that needs to be made, and it really does just depend. There are so many associated costs in regards to HMO. I mean, soundproofing, fire regulations, fire doors, social areas, insurance. It is sit down, work it out properly with a broker, and actually sometimes it might be, look, it's not going to work on this particular property, choose something slightly different. But from a risk perspective, clearly there's more money to be made. You're going to get more bang for your buck overall, but it's just whether all of those additional costs will eat into your profits.
Rob, is it an area that you like, that the bank likes?
Yeah, we're comfortable, but I think it's. I go back to when I first started underwriting mortgages. That was probably in the early 1990s. I know you wouldn't think so, but I did it at school, obviously, as part of my junior school topic. But no, I think it's sustainability and plausibility have always been the two things that any lender's got to look for. So if you apply that logic there, for the bank throughout where we are, it's about the asset initially. So is there demand in that area for a HMO? Is there demand in there for MUFBs? That's the first port of call. The second port of call, when you look at the asset, is we as a lender personally will only lend on residential property, but it's a case of what's in the proximity, what's in the location. Is it connected to any sort of commercial unit, whether it's a restaurant, etc.? You know, Alasdair mentioned Canterbury. We just did a unit in Canterbury. It was above a Prezzo restaurant, but actually it was such a good asset in such a good location. The landlord was so professional. We were more than happy to to lend against it because it was marketed correctly, there was good demand there, etc., and there was very good yields. And on the back of what Mike said, the broker actually sent in a complete business plan breakdown of how it was going to work. So we're comfortable in that space as long as they're professional, and we can then structure a loan that's determined by what the actual broker wants. So from that perspective, as a lender, we are comfortable as long, in simple terms, as the actual applicant knows what they're doing. Because the last thing we ever want to do is get into a position where we've got an asset that's gone into any sort of arrears, because it's just a lose-lose for everybody. And just to take Alasdair's point, it's not easy to evict a dog who's been renting a holiday let for their little holiday. So no, on a serious point there, it is something we are comfortable with, and I think a lot of lenders in our space are comfortable with that, as long as it's underwritten, understanding what the applicant's trying to achieve, and without the brokers who can explain that to us, and a good quality business proposition, because it is a business transaction, this, and as Mike said, the associated hidden costs have to be factored in. It's not I get X rent and I take Y off for management and this is my profit. It doesn't work like that. This has got to be a long-term investment.
Kim, is there anything you'd like to add on the topic of HMOs?
Yeah, I think it's still a huge part of our sector for what we're speaking to clients about. I think it's been interesting throughout COVID. I know we've mentioned that they are more management intensive, that's being expected, but I think from the COVID issues that were brought about, I mean, I'm part of quite a few HMO groups on social media, and seeing the landlords and speaking to some of them about the issues that they've had throughout COVID, you know, isolation, and you're in shared accommodation. If one person agrees to self-isolate, another one doesn't. So I'm hoping we're kind of coming out of that, but that has been interesting topics that I've seen in relation to that. But no, the HMO market's a huge one. I think from a broking perspective, it's really important that you kind of know your criteria inside out when it comes to HMOs. We have daily conversations with clients, you know, about valuing properties. I know, I can't remember which one of the guys mentioned it a minute ago, but a lot of them are valued on bricks and mortar, so on the basis of it being a single dwelling. But unless you know that there are few and far between lenders that could potentially look at an investment value, but there's no one size fits all, there's no magic formula or criteria. It literally comes down to the area and comparables, and ultimately what value you get out on the day, because you know it's so up in the air when it comes to HMOs. And that's probably the biggest education side that we have with our clients, in educating them when it comes to HMOs, because so many people are kind of bypassing your first investments and going straight for the HMOs. So yeah, that's the biggest educational side that we're having with clients at the moment, is getting them to understand, you know, you can't be guaranteed investment value on HMO. So yeah, it's such a big and strong market at the moment.
Thanks. Mike, you mentioned earlier, you spoke about the purchasing of Buytolet, or getting a Buytolet facility through a limited company. How does this work? What are the pros and cons? And you know, what would you have to sort of extend in the way of advice of how to approach this, and whether it's something that could be of benefit from a taxation point of view, I would have guessed?
So my advice would be get advice from an accountant, a very, very good one. Just before I say anything at all.
Okay, disclaimer.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. See, Alasdair, took your advice there. So yeah, mortgage interest relief doesn't apply to limited companies. So for most, corporation tax rates are slightly lower. Things to consider, I think. You need to understand what you're going to do and how you're going to exit, because you will pay income tax in the future. Rates are typically higher. Potentially arrangement fees could be a little bit higher. You need dual or legal separate representation, so associated costs are always a little bit more. I think they're a little bit ski-whiff in regards to your sole trader partnership mortgage rates to your limited company mortgage rates, but there are significant benefits, of course. Absolutely, you've got to take advice from an accountant, but I do think the rates are a little bit higher, and they seem to put a lot of people off when we're speaking to investors and saying, right, okay, I want to buy a limited company, and then you talk about the range of rates that are available for that. They're looking at your standard buy-to-let lenders, mortgage lenders, and they're quite different. The products are quite different. But it's get advice. Please get advice, everyone. It's get advice.
Honestly, we should have accountants on these a little bit more often, I think, as well, because they could add that perspective, as well as valuers, to Kim's point slightly earlier. Maybe that's asking for trouble. We've had a question from the audience with relation to certain green initiatives that are being encouraged by the government, and maybe more than encouraged and implemented and required. Rob, how will these, perhaps some of them will result in modifications that need to be made to properties? How will this affect the buy-to-let market, do you foresee?
So I think initially on some of the newer assets that are being constructed, it's quite simple to get in that A to C bracket regarding the EPC, and that's fine and that's great. I think the biggest issue we have from a lender's perspective is, particularly a lot of the older type properties, they would struggle to meet all the green initiatives. And I think it's a great step in the right direction. And I think any green initiatives that can be put into place is a good thing. I think that what has to be consideration needs to be given to the asset as to how to get it to that point. So for us as a lender, I'll be honest, we dipped our toe in a greener type product up until a couple of months ago. It didn't quite work from where we landed it. As I said to you before, we tried it and it didn't fully hit the mark. What actually did work for us was actually a lot of those inquiries that came in ended up on our bridge to term product, because people were taking the bridge, to take Kim's point, they were actually renovating the property the best of their standards they can get and ticking the green initiatives box and then exiting on a term. But it was easier to go in on a bridge with a guaranteed exit than it was to go in the initial term product. So I think we've just got to be mindful that, we see some beautiful assets, and, I'll promote Cornwall now because we had a beautiful property that was on a cliff top and everybody would want to go on holiday there. But actually, was it ever going to be the greenest property on the UK? No, it wasn't. But actually, the landlord had done as much as they can regarding secondary glazing, economies of heating, trying to get thermal insulation where they could. But ultimately, this was a property constructed in the late 1800s, and it was in a beautiful, wonderful location. But actually, it's never going to be green. So I think that we've got to be mindful that some of the assets we are looking to lend against, it can only go so far on the green journey. Whereas the newer constructed ones, and again, there's some wonderful assets that we've seen recently on the newer holiday parks and the newer holiday homes, and they're ticking all the boxes, which is wonderful to see as well. But we've just got to be mindful that we can't tick every box because the assets aren't going to let us get there. And the inquiries we were receiving on that product were falling out of bed because they weren't as green as we'd anticipated they would be. So I think it's just balancing that with the government initiatives, and we are doing all we can as lenders to make it happen, but sometimes it's just not possible.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because a lot of the hallmarks that make maybe even a holiday-let scenario iconic or something that you want to visit is that it is old and it is maybe less open to adaptation. Does anyone else on the panel have any thoughts around green issues in the buy-to-let space? It's something that we're focusing on in a number of different respects as a publication, but if you've got anything to add, I'd love to hear it.
There's two things I always think about. So there's what Rob's just described, which is the new modern methods of construction. Lots of lenders are starting to do that. We've got lenders, we're starting to do quite a bit in terms of airspace development because of the new permitted rights. A lot of lenders don't like airspace development because you're building on top of people's flats and they don't tend to like that. The way that some developers are getting around that is just putting up, prefabricated units on top, which is very good and environmentally friendly. So lenders are doing their bit in terms of the modern methods of construction. That's great. But we also work with a lot of local enterprise partnerships and councils across the UK, because we do quite a lot of development as well, development finance. And actually, the most environmentally friendly type of construction you can be doing is retrofitting old, unused, derelict buildings. And I think people forget about that. We did a survey recently of all the sort of buy-to-let products and sort of deals that we've done over the last 18 months. Over 80% of what we had done was landlords who weren't buying a property that a family would have bought, but were doing something. They were changing it into an HMO, sort of permitted development, or all that sort of stuff. So a landlord that is taking a underused, so say Presto in Canterbury, like great, it's got a Presto on the ground floor, but the uppers are derelict, and actually turning them into usable accommodation is great for the environment. The guys that are taking barns from unused barns in farms and turning them into holiday accommodation. So there's a lot of, everyone's focused on the modern methods of construction, which is great, but actually a lot of what is happening where people are regenerating town centres or unused buildings is incredibly good for the environment as well. The worst thing you can be doing is new build concrete. That's what's killing the world, not the good quality guys that are building 1-bed, 2-bed flats above Presto and Cambridge in Canterbury, right?
Yeah, as they say, you can't build yourself out of a climate crisis, right? Okay, so I think we've just got a few minutes left. I'd like to incorporate just the final thing and with closing comments, anything else that you'd like to say, but not to end things on a negative note, but I think we just need to be mindful of anything that's coming up for landlords that maybe they should have on their radar. The end of furlough is near. We do have some other sort of support packages, all sorts of things that are going to be happening between now and the end of the year that landlords, investors and their brokers will want to be cognizant of. Does the panel have any words of sort of advice for those people considering this market or considering making some moves in this market, what they should look out for, and then also any closing comments you'd like to make? Kim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think if anything, it's for people to be prepared. And I think that is part of the lender's responsibility in order to ascertain affordability for these clients that are applying for these loans. So by providing 6 months cash reserves and things like that, I think that, for anyone getting into property, it's a long game. These times, okay, maybe not COVID, but like the credit crunch and things like that, they will come about again. But I think by being prepared, having the savings and the cash flow there, then people should be fine. But yeah, I'm feeling really good and positive about everything that's going on, the way it's going at the moment. But yeah, I think just by being prepared, that's all people can do, really.
Thank you very much, Kim. Mike, come on to you next.
Yeah, basically what Kim said. I think you've got to go into this market irrelevant of what you're going to be buying with your eyes open. Do we need to be slightly mindful of things like furlough ending, maybe certain sectors failing or not being supported as well as there have been, and those tenants being involved or potential tenants being involved in those sectors? You've got to have some cash flow kicking about. You've got to have the right amount of income. It's not make money fast on day one. It can take time. The boiler can blow up. A big storm could come in and flooding could happen, or a roof could be taken off. I've got a portfolio myself. I know firsthand the costs involved in running that portfolio. It's not easy. Go on social media, speak to other investors, find out what the pitfalls are, but use a really, really good broker like Commercial Expert and get some damn good advice.
Shameless, Mike. Thank you. Alasdair.
Biggest cloud on the horizon for me is taxes going to go up. I think for everybody, but I think buy-to-let investors, because they're misunderstood, I think there's going to be tax increases, whether that's through limited companies, etc. I think the key thing professional buy-to-let should be continuing to push is they're a positive influence in their community. They're running businesses. They're actually adding value. They're not buying property. But if we can make sure that people understand that, then tax rises will be mitigated. But I think we all know that tax rises are coming, and buy-to-let investors are possibly going to get hit more than most.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Alasdair. And Rob, over to you for your final thoughts and any concerns on the horizon.
I think to me, to encompass all the points that have been made, it's making sure people have a plan B, and it's the what if scenario. And I think it's understanding that they need to factor that into the advice they receive from a good quality broker. Mike's used the phrase I use a lot, which is going with your eyes open. So there's no hidden cost there. They should all be out in the open. And as Alasdair says, that the cost may, over the next few years, increase from a taxation perspective, which could reduce your profit. So have a plan to that. And then from the brokers listening to this, I think the key is, and Kim said it in the first 10 minutes, is speak to your lenders. I think we are very open to conversations, and I speak on behalf of all specialist lenders that we are keen to engage. We do actually speak to each other occasionally, which is quite unheard of. But on the back of that, I think there's a lot of space in the market for innovation. I think lenders are going to have to react to things a lot quicker than they've done historically, and it's not just all about pulling the rate lever, it's about adding value. But for the investors and your clients and brokers listening to this, is getting the best advice they can. And if they're uncomfortable in dealing with the transaction themselves, speak to an expert. There's 3 people on this panel here. There's other people who are out there who are experts as well, who will help and guide them through the process. So I think for me, that's the advice you take away from this. And don't be afraid of it, because it's a growing market and clients will want to transact in it. So for me, just do that and the clients will get the best for everybody. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much. That just leaves me to, thank the panel, Mike, Kim and Alasdair for your sharing your time, and of course to Rob and Castle Trust Bank for supporting us in putting this on. We will have the video and a short sort of highlight summary available this time next week. So for all the people watching, if you do want to share this with someone or think that they could benefit from listening to the conversation, you'll be able to do that from next week, and that will be available on bridgingandcommercial.co.uk. So thank you very much once again to the panel and everybody for tuning in. Have a wonderful weekend and rest of your Friday. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.